The day my grandmother died, I inherited two things, her fortune and her wisdom. Sometimes, she had written in her final letter, "People show their truest selves only when they think you have nothing." I was 23 when I received that letter, along with documents detailing my inheritance, $50 million in diversified investments, real estate holdings across 3 continents, and controlling shares in several major corporations. My grandmother, Eleanor Wright, had built an empire from nothing, but she'd done it quietly. The world knew the businesses, but few knew the woman behind them. My parents never understood her. To them, Eleanor was just the frustratingly frugal mother-in-law who refused to fund their lavish lifestyle. They didn't know she was actually one of the wealthiest women in Chicago. That was exactly how she wanted it. Sophia, my mother's voice cut through my thoughts as I sat at our dining room table, still holding the letter. Did that grandmother of yours leave us anything useful? Or was it just another collection of her precious books? I looked up at Diana Maxwell, the woman who had spent the last 20 years trying to mold me into her version of the perfect daughter and failing miserably. She stood in our kitchen doorway, immaculately dressed as always, disappointment etched into every line of her face. "Just books," I lied smoothly, tucking the letter away, "and some old photographs." She sighed dramatically. Typical. That woman never understood the importance of maintaining proper social standing. Do you know what the Hendersons would say if they could see our 10-year-old car? I did know. I'd heard about the Hendersons, the Blackwells, and every other family my mother desperately tried to impress for the past 2 decades. Their opinions mattered more to her than oxygen. "I'm sure they're too busy with their own lives to care about our car, Mom." "That's exactly the kind of attitude that worries me," she snapped. "You're just like her. No understanding of how the world really works. Thank God Alexander has more sense." Ah, yes, Alexander. My younger brother, the golden child. Even now, at 20, he had never worked a day in his life. Why should he? Mom and Dad funded his every whim, from his failed startup ventures to his collection of luxury watches. Speaking of Alexander, my mother continued, brightening considerably, "He's just been accepted into Harvard Business School. Your father and I are throwing a celebration dinner tonight. All the right people will be there. Wear something appropriate." Her eyes swept critically over my simple dress and minimal jewelry. I nodded, not mentioning that I'd graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern's business school last year. There had been no party for that. Instead, my parents had spent that weekend at Alexander's amateur golf tournament. Later that evening, I sat in my small apartment above the bookstore where I supposedly worked, reviewing my grandmother's documents. The bookstore job was actually a front. I owned the building and 3 others on the block through one of my grandmother's holding companies. But as far as my family knew, I was just a struggling bookkeeper, living paycheck to paycheck. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Don't be late tonight. The Blackwells are bringing their son James. Wear the blue dress your mother bought you." James Blackwell. Of course. They were still trying to orchestrate that match, seeing him as my ticket to proper society. If they only knew that I could buy the Blackwells company 3 times over. I arrived at my parents' house precisely on time, wearing a simple black dress instead of the gaudy blue one my mother preferred. The valet? Yes, they had hired a valet for the evening. Gave me a sympathetic look as I handed him the keys to my modest Honda Civic. Inside, the house was transformed. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light from the grand chandelier, elegant flower arrangements adorned every surface, and the air was thick with expensive perfume and pretension. Sophia. My mother's voice carried across the foyer, tight with barely concealed irritation. I thought I told you to wear the blue dress. This one was clean, I replied simply. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering patience. At least try to make a good impression on James. His family's company is very successful. I bit back a smile, remembering the report on my desk about Blackwell Industries' recent financial troubles. Their success was mostly smoke and mirrors at this point. Alexander chose that moment to make his entrance, drawing every eye in the room. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than my supposed monthly salary. "There's my boy," our father boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. Harvard Business School's newest star. I watched as person after person congratulated him, praising his natural business acumen and brilliant mind. None of them seemed to remember his 3 failed businesses, all funded by our parents' increasingly strained resources. James Blackwell sidled up to me, champagne in hand. "Sophia," he smiled, all white teeth and practiced charm. "Still working at that little bookstore?" "Someone has to pay the bills," I said mildly. He laughed as if I'd told a particularly amusing joke. "You know, my family's company always has positions available for motivated individuals. I'll keep that in mind." The evening continued in this vein, a parade of wealth and subtle condescension. I watched my parents fawn over Alexander, making endless excuses for his past failures while pointing to his imagined future successes. But beneath the sparkle and shine, I could see the cracks. The way my father's hand shook slightly as he signed the catering bill. The tight look around my mother's eyes when someone mentioned their recent vacation. Actually, a desperate business trip to save a failing investment. They were in trouble, though they'd die before admitting it. Years of funding Alexander's expensive education, failed ventures, and extravagant lifestyle had taken their toll. The mansion they were so proud of, the one they'd remortgaged 3 times to maintain appearances, was slowly slipping through their fingers. What they didn't know was that I'd been watching, waiting, and quietly buying up their debt through various shell companies. Every desperate loan, every refinanced mortgage, I owned them all. As I drove home that night in my sensible Honda, I thought about my grandmother's words. People do show their truest selves when they think you have nothing. And soon, very soon, my family was going to show exactly who they really were. The signs of my parents' financial collapse became impossible to ignore, even for them. It started with small things. The household staff was temporarily reduced. Their country club membership became inactive. And suddenly my mother discovered a passion for vintage fashion. But Alexander's lifestyle never changed. Even as the family finances crumbled, my parents continued funding his every whim. The day I saw him drive past my bookstore in a brand new Porsche, I knew they had finally hit rock bottom. I was in my real office, not the cramped bookstore back room where I pretended to work, but my actual office on the 47th floor of downtown Chicago's most prestigious building. As CEO of Wright Investments, I had a perfect view of the city my grandmother had helped build. "Miss Wright," my assistant Sarah buzzed in. "Your brother just made another withdrawal from your parents' emergency fund." I pulled up the banking records on my screen. There it was, $175,000 transferred to a luxury car dealership. Money they definitely didn't have. "How much do they have left?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Less than $50,000, Mom. And their mortgage payment is due next week." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the careful web I'd woven over the past year. Through various holding companies, I owned not just their mortgage, but all their outstanding debt. Every credit card, every loan, every desperate attempt to maintain their facade of wealth. I controlled it all. Schedule the foreclosure notices, I instructed Sarah. It's time. The next morning, I arrived at the bookstore early, knowing what was coming. Right on schedule, my mother burst through the door, her designer handbag genuine but last season. Sophia. Her voice was shrill with panic. Something terrible has happened. The bank. They're saying they're going to foreclose on the house. I looked up from the ledger I was pretending to review. What? How is that possible? Your father. There have been some business setbacks, but it's just temporary. We just need a little help. She reached across the counter, gripping my hand. Darling, how much do you have saved? I almost laughed. After years of mocking my little bookstore job, she was now eyeing my supposed savings like a lifeline. Mom, I make $35,000 a year. After rent and bills, I'd barely save anything. Her face fell. But surely you must have something. An emergency fund? I have about $3,000 saved. I lied. But that's everything. We need it, she said immediately. Just until your father's deals come through. Alexander has some very promising ventures in the works. I sat back studying her. What about Alexander's new Porsche? Couldn't he sell that? Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. He needs to maintain appearances. How else will he attract the right kind of investors? And my appearance doesn't matter. That's different. She waved her hand vaguely. You're just not in those circles anyway. In those circles, I thought about the charity gala I'd be hosting next month as Eleanor Wright's hair, where half of Chicago's elite would be in attendance. But my mother didn't know about that. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't empty my savings account. I need to pay rent. She stood up, anger replacing desperation. How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, confusion crossed her face, as if she were genuinely trying to remember any significant thing they'd done to help me succeed. We gave you a good home, an education. The education I paid for with student loans, you mean? The same loans you refused to help with because you were funding Alexander's third startup. That's not fair. Alexander has vision. He just needs support too. Get out. My voice was quiet but firm. Excuse me. Get out of my store, Mom. And don't ask me for money again. She left in a fury of slammed doors and threats, but I wasn't worried. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. That evening, I received another call, this time from my father. Sophia, we need to discuss this situation like adults, he began, his business negotiation voice in full effect. Your mother tells me you were quite unhelpful today. I can't give you my savings, Dad. Now listen here, young lady. This family has a reputation to maintain. We can't have the house foreclosed. Do you have any idea what that would do to our standing? To Alexander's prospects? I thought about the foreclosure notices being prepared in my lawyer's office at that very moment. Maybe Alexander could help? He just bought a new Porsche. He must have money. That's different. That was an investment in his future. He needs to project success to be successful. And what about my future? He sighed heavily. Sophia, let's be realistic. You work in a bookstore. Your future is, well, it's already set, isn't it? But Alexander has real potential. The words stung, even though I'd heard variations of them my entire life. I'm sorry, Dad. I can't help. Then you're no daughter of mine. The line went dead. I sat in my luxurious office, looking out over the city lights, and smiled. Soon they would learn exactly what kind of daughter I was. The bankruptcy hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. on a crisp October morning. I arrived early, watching from my car as my family pulled up in Alexander's Porsche. Apparently, the only vehicle they had left. My mother's designer outfit was pristine, but last season. My father's suit looked tired, and even Alexander's usual smirk seemed strained. They hadn't seen me yet, didn't know I was here. As far as they knew, their wayward daughter was still counting pennies at her bookstore. I waited until they entered the courthouse before following. Inside my briefcase were documents that would change everything. Proof of ownership, transfer records, and the truth about who really controlled their fate. The bankruptcy courtroom was already filling up. Chicago's elite had come to witness the fall of the Maxwell family. My parents sat in the front row, heads held high despite their circumstances. Alexander slouched beside them, tapping on his phone. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Marion Wheeler entered. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to bankruptcy cases, particularly those involving what she called self-inflicted financial wounds. Case number 2847. Maxwell Family Bankruptcy Petition, she announced, reviewing the papers before her. "I see the creditor's representative is present." This was my cue. I stood up from my seat in the back, straightening my channel suit. Not that my family would recognize it as such. They'd never seen me wear anything but off-the-rack clothing. "Yes, Your Honor." Sophia Wright, representing Wright Investments. The reaction was immediate. My mother's perfectly maintained facade cracked as she whirled around. My father's face went pale, and Alexander actually dropped his phone. "Sophia?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. I walked to the front of the courtroom, placing my briefcase on the creditor's table. "Good morning, Mother. Father. Alexander." "What is the meaning of this?" my father demanded, starting to rise before his lawyer pulled him back down. Judge Wheeler banged her gavel. "Mr. Maxwell, you will maintain order in my courtroom. Ms. Wright, please proceed." "Your Honor, Wright Investments holds all outstanding debts of the Maxwell family, including their primary residence mortgage, personal loans, and credit accounts. The total sum is approximately $12.7 million. "That's impossible," Alexander blurted out. "Sophia works in a bookstore." I smiled. "Actually, I own the bookstore, along with the building it's in, and most of the block. I'm the CEO of Wright Investments, formerly known as Eleanor Wright Enterprises." The courtroom erupted in whispers. My grandmother had been a legend in Chicago business circles, though few had known her face. "Order," Judge Wheeler commanded. "Ms. Wright, continue." 3 years ago, I inherited my grandmother's entire estate, valued at approximately $50 million. During that time, I watched as my parents repeatedly refinanced their home to fund my brother's failed ventures and maintain their lifestyle. Through various holding companies, I purchased all their debt. My mother was openly crying now, her carefully applied makeup running. My father sat frozen, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of their situation. However, I continued, "I'm not here to demand immediate repayment. I have a proposal." I withdrew a document from my briefcase. "I'm willing to restructure all outstanding debts under the following conditions. First, Alexander's spending privileges will be completely cut off. He'll need to find actual employment, not another startup opportunity." Alexander jumped up. "You can't do this. I'm your brother." "Sit down, Mr. Maxwell," Judge Wheeler ordered. Continue, Ms. Wright. Second, my parents will undergo financial counseling and maintain strict budget oversight. Third, they will sell the mansion and move into a more modest home, which I have already purchased for them. This is ridiculous. My father finally found his voice. You're our daughter. You can't treat us this way. I turned to face them fully for the first time. Can't I? For 20 years, you treated me like I was nothing. You mocked my job, dismissed my achievements, and poured every resource into Alexander, while leaving me to fend for myself. When you needed help, you demanded my savings, all $3,000 you thought I had, without a second thought. We gave you everything, my mother protested. No, Mother. You gave Alexander everything. I built this myself. Or rather, Grandmother helped me build it. She taught me that true character shows when people think you have nothing, and you've shown yours very clearly. Judge Wheeler reviewed the proposed agreement. The terms seemed fair, considerably more generous than standard bankruptcy proceedings. Do the Maxwells wish to accept? My father's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. They really had no choice. It was this or lose everything. We accept, my father ground out. Excellent, I said, retrieving more documents. Here are the keys to your new house. It's a lovely 3-bedroom in Laken Park. The moving company will arrive tomorrow. Oh, and Alexander? I turned to my brother. The dealership has been instructed to repossess the Porsche. I have arranged for a used Toyota to be delivered instead. The next hour was a blur of signatures and legal proceedings. My parents barely looked at me, their shame and anger palpable. Alexander stormed out as soon as he could, probably to move money I'd already frozen. As I left the courthouse, I heard quick footsteps behind me. Why? My mother's voice was small. Why did you let us fall so far before revealing the truth? I turned to face her. Because you needed to learn. Money isn't what makes a person valuable, Mother. Neither are appearances or social standing. I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be judged for your bank account rather than your character. And now, will you ever forgive us? That depends on you. The house I bought you is nice. Not luxurious, but comfortable. Your new budget is reasonable. Not extravagant, but adequate. What you do with this second chance is up to you. I walked to my car, not the Honda Civic they were familiar with, but a sleek Mercedes I'd kept hidden until now. Oh, and Mother, I called back. That blue dress you wanted me to wear to Alexander's party. I bought the company that makes it last year. They've discontinued that particular style. It was hideous. The look on her face was worth every second of the past 3 years. 3 months later, I sat in my office reviewing reports. My parents had actually stuck to their budget, attending financial counseling without complaint. Alexander had finally taken a real job, entry level, of course, and was learning what actual work felt like. On my desk sat a new photo frame containing an old picture of my grandmother and me in front of her favorite bookstore, the same one I now owned. Her words from that final letter still rang true. Sometimes people show their truest selves only when they think you have nothing. But she had taught me something else too. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in wealth itself, but in choosing when to reveal it.